introduce our speaker. You ready to go? All right. Commissioner Ryan Calkins works as a nonprofit professional in, I was joking it was ergonomic development, but it's economic development. For more than a decade, Ryan ran an import distribution company in Seattle that was recognized for its industry-leading sustainability initiatives. In 2007, he formed Seattle Microfinance Organization, a nonprofit dedicated to expanding access to capital for entrepreneurs with limited economic resources. Ryan began his career in Central and South America, working for disaster relief and human rights nonprofits. Commissioner Calkins focuses on sustainable economic development at the Port of Seattle, working to ensure that our region's prosperity is shared among all of our communities. Ryan balances current needs with a long-term vision for the Port of Seattle to ensure that one of our region's most valuable public assets will continue to thrive for generations to come. So, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's fun to be at the Heathman. In my prior life, I ran our family's import and distribution company, as was mentioned, and we did stone and tile mostly, and so some of the remodeled tile and stone in this building was from our company. And I brought my wife over after the remodel and did a staycation here, so I got to sort of take part in the facility. It was great. I really want to say thanks for the opportunity to be here. You know, as commissioners at the Port of Seattle, one of our most important roles is to be an ambassador for the port to the community, and I think it's often forgotten that we're not really the Port of Seattle, we're the Port of King County. And so to have an opportunity to come to Kirkland today and share with you a bit about what's going on at the port is a great opportunity. I'm sorry that it's not Sam Cho, Kirkland's own port commissioner. He's better looking, smarter, I think has a brighter future, but I'm taller, so you get the taller one. And I just want to also recognize that I wholeheartedly agree with the assessment of 425 magazine that Kirkland is in fact the best city on the east side. So, and when I go to Woodinville or wherever next month, I'll say the same thing. Just kidding. One last thing about Kirkland, I had a chance, and I forget the name of the business, but I had a chance last summer to come over Monday through Friday to drop my daughter off, who's now 6 years old, at the culinary school for kids. Anybody know the name of? Yeah, Frog Legs. That's right. It was awesome, and so we got to enjoy the products of her success as a junior cook last summer, and I think we're going to do it again this summer. So I'll get into the real thing, and Carrie's going to help me with slides too, so we can scoot along. Does everybody know Carrie Pravitz? She's our representative from the port. One of the best things we do at the Port of Seattle is we hire away the best talent from the other public agencies and other businesses, and and it's been an absolute joy for me to get to know Carrie as colleagues. So kudos to the port for hiring away another amazing person. I know that during the last couple of years we've experienced a lot of uncertainty, and I think our communities have also shown a lot of resilience and tenacity, and hopefully today we'll see some examples of how the port is helping our community in those ways in particular. We've been around for 110 years. We were the first port district in the state of Washington. The legislator created ports because Seattle needed a port district. And so we really got to lead the way. And now there are 75 public ports in the state of Washington, more than double any other state in the nation. We are a leader, not just nationally, but around the world in moving people and goods. That's essentially what we do. We've got facilities ranging in scope from a half-acre park to one of the largest airports. I think we're the 8th largest airport in terms of passenger traffic in the United States. And we've got incredible and premier container terminals on the waterfront as well. Many of you may have seen the news stories about our first international flight to use the new international arrivals facility. I just booked my first trip in which I get to come back through that I think on June 2nd, and I'm excited to walk across that pedestrian sky bridge, which is nearly the length of 3 football fields. It's the largest sky bridge over an active taxiway in the world. And it was quite an engineering marvel to see that thing built and then moved down the runway and put into place. I hope you all have a chance to do some international travel and experience that yourself. On the marine cargo side, the Northwest Seaport Alliance, which I'll take a little bit of time in a bit to talk about, is a joint marine cargo operating alliance that puts together the ports of Seattle and Tacoma so that instead of competing against each other in a race to the bottom, we work together to attract cargo to our gateway instead of Canadian ports or California ports. It's been an absolutely innovative model. We had to get a special dispensation from the federal government to do it, but everybody agrees it's been a great marriage. And we're continuing to improve that partnership. It's now the fourth largest container cargo gateway in the United States. Fisherman's Terminal that was where we first started. It was the first operational Port of Seattle property in 1914. We're now in the process of taking our oldest building there and developing it into the Maritime Innovation Center, or MINC, which is going to house a cohort of startup maritime businesses that we think will help to seed the next generation of the maritime ecosystem and industry. Fisherman's Terminal originally and continues to be a place where the fishing fleet can moor and repair and provision their boats in the off-season. We didn't have a single place in Seattle to do that, and fishermen had to find a place to moor, and so it created kind of a hub for all the activity. Today, more than 11,000 jobs with over $500 million in payroll depend upon vessels at the Port of Seattle. And what's really extraordinary is just how much of the total landed catch in the United States comes through Fisherman's Terminal fleet. It's about 44%, or almost half of all the landed catch in the United States, originates right here in our county. So that's the North Pacific fisheries you can think about. It's the salmon up off the coast of Alaska, the whitefish, hake and pollock and others. Whether you're eating at a McDonald's fish fillet or a fine dining restaurant, those guys are doing it, and they're doing it really well, thanks in part to the facilities we have here in King County. We're also a major real estate and cruise hub, right? We've got recreational boating marinas. We've got one of the most diverse and complex real estate portfolios of any public agency. And as is noticeable right now, we have the largest and fastest growing cruise market on the west coast of the United States. We are the home port for the Alaska cruise market. There's a few that originate in Vancouver, a few longer cruises that come out of California. But for the most part, the industry is really centered here. We've been doing that. Raise your hand. When do you think the first sailing was? Somebody take a guess. Anybody? 95, close. It was 2001. So we went from 0 passengers in 2000 to 1.2 million pre-pandemic. And we anticipate this year, depending on how things go, we'll probably broach, once again, we'll breach the million passenger mark, or which means basically 500,000 people coming and going through those ships. It brings about $900 million to our region every year. And it's not just folks eating at restaurants downtown before they jump on the boats. We've got bakeries in Kent that provide literally millions of croissants to the cruise vessels as they go out. We've got all of the tug and towboat operators that serve those vessels as they're coming and going. So it's an enormous economic advantage to have that home ported here in Seattle. We just hired Linda Springman as our new director. She's an external hire, and she's bringing 25 years of cruise industry experience to our team, replacing a longtime employee there. We're also a countywide government agency, so I know that everyone in this room voted for me last fall. Thank you. If you didn't, you can leave now. No. But we are elected countywide because we're a countywide organization. Our footprint is countywide, and so everybody gets a say in who's going to run the Port of Seattle. As you know, there are 5 of us. And it's a part-time job. I can tell you more about my job over coffee, my other job over coffee at some point, but I serve as the executive director of a new nonprofit actually based in the Spring District. So that's what I do when I'm not wearing my port commissioner hat. But part of the reason we're elected is because we are able to levy taxes. And so we want to know that we're accountable to the folks who are going to pay for that stuff. And I'll get into the budget stuff in a little bit. But effectively, we're an economic development agency. That's our mission with public service accountability. We have certain business lines that operate much more like a business that really need to sort of turn a profit that aren't subsidized by levy funds. But there are other areas where maybe the market wouldn't step in and fill that gap. And so that's the appropriate role for a government agency like the Port of Seattle. The airport, for example, is self-funded. We don't use levy dollars to fund the airport. The levy accounts for about $72 per median priced home in King County. And another way to think about that is every time a new person comes into King County and starts paying property taxes in one way or another, it slightly reduces your levy to the port because we just ask for a fixed amount. And so it gets divvied up amongst all the property owners in the county, and that comes out to about $72 per year for the median priced home. It's about 4% of our overall budget. So 96% of our budget is revenues from fees and charges and tenants paying their leases at our facilities. So mostly my prior experience as a private business owner, for the 96% of the budget is really run like a private business. That's been pretty similar for me, and that 4% that we get from the tax levy is really what we use for that stuff that wouldn't otherwise be covered by the market. 6 years ago, we joined forces with the Port of Tacoma to form the Seaport Alliance, which I mentioned before. It's a cooperation between the two ports to try to save jobs in our region, and now we're really growing jobs. There's about $4 billion in labor income each year, and about almost $13 billion this coming year in business output. Keep in mind that in Washington state, we are the most trade-dependent state in the nation. You've probably heard that before. It's about 40% of all jobs in the state of Washington, somewhere or another, rely upon trade. And we are the gateway for that. So we're pretty proud of that. Just a little bit of kind of where we're at on the marine cargo side of things. We saw a big dip, of course, in 2020, but then it rebounded much more quickly than air travel did. And in fact, in some areas, it has now surpassed pre-pandemic levels. The congestion, the supply chain congestion that we're experiencing on the West Coast has slowed that growth, but we're starting to work through that. Some of the leading indicators show that things are getting better, and we anticipate that by next year we may surpass our record numbers from 2019. We are an economic driver for the region. We're providing essential services for almost all of our major industries, things like agriculture as exporters, technology, tourism, of course, as a hub for business travel and leisure travel. But it's not just important for you guys from an economic development perspective. Port of Seattle is a part of your daily lives, and probably in the most concrete way at the airport, right? We all use the airport, and so we've got to run that well for you guys. We demand of ourselves an extraordinary customer service experience when you guys are going there. And additionally, we want to do that in a way that is sustainable and equitable for our communities. We want to make sure that we're providing safe and efficient operations for you all. One of the ways that we try to keep on track is by listening. And so Commissioner Cho last year kicked off a series of listening sessions that then it was kind of an initial idea to get key stakeholders together around a small table and expanded from maybe 3 or 4 stakeholder groups into, I think it was eventually 11 stakeholder groups. And it was an extraordinary exercise for us in hearing directly from folks that really engage with us, but may not have visibility into what the commission is doing. And so, we were meeting with community members in heavily impacted areas. We were meeting with the tribal organizations, labor, business from our various business lines, other elected officials around the region. And we came out of that with a real guiding document that helped us to think about our 2022 budget and beyond. So it was an exercise for us that was really helpful. Of course, COVID was an unprecedented crisis for us. I think this is probably the most dramatic slide that you'll see today, but just look at the difference between so this is passengers at SeaTac. Look at the slight drop year over year for 9/11, the Great Recession, and then here's COVID. We're anticipating getting back up to about here, 90% of where we were prior to COVID this coming year. That's driven by actually we're higher than we were pre-COVID on leisure travel. Business travel hasn't come back quite as well yet, But we're starting to see from our big business travel contingents like Amazon and Microsoft that they're kind of unleashing their employees to start doing business travel again. And then you couple that with high increasing demand and high oil prices, and we're seeing that the cost of tickets are going up too. Unfortunately, we don't get a commission; we get a flat fee on tickets. But so we are definitely seeing the facilities really come back into full use. We were able to, like, if you were a business owner, if you go back to that last slide, Carrie, if you were a business owner and you went through that dip, I don't know that as a business owner I could have sustained that, and we would have had a hard time at the Port of Seattle without significant debt or something. But ARPA and the CARES Act and other federal government supports came in and really gave us the cash flow that we needed, and we're able to distribute to our tenants, to other key businesses at the airport, to get them through that really tough time. I mean, essentially we had dropped from in April of 2020 we were at 5% of April of 2021. So nobody was eating at the restaurants. Nobody needed their bags moved. So it was a very difficult time. But those programs really did provide us with the kind of bridge funding we needed to get through. As I mentioned before, most of our operating revenue, 80%, comes from operational fees. So we really needed to get the economy back and going for our long-term financial health. They're also, of course, our operations are a huge driver of economic activity and jobs. And so when we bounce back, our region gets to bounce back too. Throughout the entire crisis, COVID was a real bright spot. Cargo was a real bright spot. COVID was not a bright spot for anything. We're going to have to erase that from the recording and start fresh. Can you edit that out in post-production? Thank you. So as you all know, service economy dropped, goods economy took off. And so our cargo operations, of course, really started to feel those supply chain differences. We were able to open our new Terminal 5 facility just in time, January 1st of this year, to really address some of that congestion. Terminal 5 is a premier gateway on the West Coast. It is a 185-acre facility right up next to West Seattle that will be able to manage 2 of the largest ultra-large container ships, meaning it can process almost as much as any terminal along the West Coast. And that was a $500 billion public-private partnership to open that new facility, and phase 2 will open early next year. Tons of jobs. It's why you guys get your Amazon packages when you want them, because we have that facility so nearby. We also wanted to make sure that we didn't slow down on our capital spending. We knew that during the crisis, we could be counter-cyclical. We could keep a certain number of capital construction jobs going. We could keep people working, provided we did it safely. And in hindsight, that was one of the best decisions that I've made as a commissioner, is in late April of 2020, when the executive director and our senior leadership team came to the commission and said, what do we do? Do we lay off workers? Do we slow down projects? And we said, full speed ahead. We'll figure out the financing, but we got to keep going. And that, I think, turned out to be one of the best decisions we could have made. And now, honestly, it's made our jobs a lot easier now, because we aren't having to go back and backfill positions that we had laid off in an extremely tight labor market. We also created a number of targeted economic development programs that address some of our needs and our related industry needs. Workforce for us is a conversation we have all the time. And we're not just thinking about next quarter or next year, but we're really thinking about how do we train the next generation of the workforce that we need at the airport and the seaport. And we're talking about tens of thousands of people. One of my proudest accomplishments is the establishment of Maritime High School, which was an idea I had after visiting aviation high school. And within 2.5 years, we kicked off and is now a new institution in Highland Public Schools in South Seattle and South King County. Welcomed its first class last September. They're recruiting now for the second class. If you know any 8th or 9th graders who are interested in an education different than a traditional high school, it's all project-based learning, no grades, it's mastery and collaborative. And I got to go down and visit again this week. It is truly an extraordinary experience for kids who are interested in maritime. And it's not just one form of maritime. It is the whole gamut. You want to be a lawyer interested in maritime law. You want to be a vessel operator like a captain or a steward. If you want to be in marine biology, that is the high school to go to for sure. That was my own, I added that piece, Carrie, forgive me. As a port, we are truly committed to communities throughout King County. We, as you all know, have been engaged in economic development work, not just right around our facilities, but throughout the county and in partnership in particular with local cities and communities. For Kirkland in particular in 2022, we awarded $10,000 through our tourism marketing support program, which helped to create a digital video advertising campaign targeting folks from California to come up and take advantage of the fact that Kirkland is this incredible combination of eco and urban. And then the city of Kirkland also has been selected for something called Spotlight SEA, which is where we provide advertising opportunities within the airport for local municipalities. We're also working on a grant request from the city of Kirkland for $120,000 over 2 years to support Startup 425, Workforce Development Procurement, 425 Accelerator, and Shop Local Kirkland, Explore Kirkland campaign. So there's lots of opportunities for us to take our economic development mission as a port and do something other than simply making a place for planes and boats to park. We are really proud too that we maintained a focus on climate as we did all this recovery effort. It is the main reason I got involved in this is wanting to be a climate champion at a big public agency like this. And I will say that I think the port has been an extraordinary leader amongst ports, but also even amongst public agencies here in our region, in saying we can look at ways to create economic growth and environmental sustainability at the same time. I asked in 2019 that we begin to look at the goals that we had set for ourselves in 2012 and see if they were aggressive enough. And so last year we voted to accelerate our decarbonization goals so that our own operations would be carbon zero by 2040 instead of 2050. And that's what we call scope 1. And then our scope 2 and scope 3 zero carbon plan is to hit that target by 2050, which means we're talking about how do we get all those planes and ships and trains and trucks to zero emissions or zero carbon by 2015. That is an enormous lift, but I think we've got the type of constituent, the communities that are supporting that. And I also think that in hindsight, people will look back and say, by doing that, you got a first mover advantage. You moved us into the green economy, and now we're all benefiting because our economy has all that green jobs expertise, all of the industry that's going to come alongside that. Personally, I'm working on developing the Puget Sound as a floating offshore wind hub, which is a major new industry that I'm sure PSE could tell us chapter and verse about. It's one of the most promising forms of electricity generation of all the ones that we see out there with the fewest impacts, but we don't have it on the West Coast. They have it in Asia, they have it in Europe. It's really developing now on the East Coast. And technologically it's been difficult because our oceans are really deep here. So where are you going to put those foundations? So some clever folks have figured out how to make floating versions of them. And we think we can build them and service them here in Seattle and in the Puget Sound. And they anticipate that just on the West Coast of the United States, it'll be a $110 billion industry in the next 10 years. If we can pull that off, that'll be the thing that's in my obituary for sure, because it will have such a huge impact for jobs and for the environment. Sorry again, Carrie, I keep going off script. We're also working with local companies like Seattle City Light and PSE to advance these goals because we know that we can't do it alone. We also do a lot of habitat restoration. You can see up here 3 projects. This is Smith Cove up here, the north end of Elliott Bay. This one is in between Terminal 25 and Harbor Island, if you know Harbor Island. So this is the West Seattle Bridge right here. And then that is the Duwamish River People's Park, which was a Superfund cleanup site that's now been totally cleaned up and is now accessible by the community in South Park, which historically had suffered some of the biggest impacts of port and other maritime related activities. we know that a lot of this stuff can be kind of nebulous. So I want to talk a lot about the airport because that's the kind of fun stuff. And I also want to be a salesperson today for our airport and get you guys to use some of the new features we have there too. It's also some of the most exciting things that are going on at the port right now. We're really trying to make it safe and efficient, and also just a place that you want to go. I want you to think, I'm going to go early because there's so many cool things going on at the airport. So we're introducing all sorts of new technology tools, things like pre-booked parking. Has anyone used the pre-booked parking feature yet? Oh, awesome, great. So imagine not having to worry about, when I show up, will there be a spot for me in what used to be the world's largest parking garage? And when I get there, it's going to tell me where to go. So I'm not driving around figuring out where to park. It'll just tell me where to go. The second is the Spot Saver program, which is an opportunity. It's under the virtual queuing there. When you book your ticket and you check yourself in, you'll get a note saying, hey, you can book your spot in the TSA line. And I've used it personally. It works great. I have 3 kids, and it's always a nightmare going through security. And so they give you a 15-minute window. You show up, you walk to the front of the line, you go through. It's as if you're royalty. It's amazing. And that has been a great success. And we're partnering with both Alaska and Delta, which represent 75% of our flights at the airport. So most travel that you'll have out of SeaTac would offer that. Order SEA is our mobile food ordering platform. So once you're at the airport and you want food, you can actually have it brought to you at the gate. So instead of having to go wait in line, you can just order it and have it brought to you at the gate. And then finally, and if there is anything that will pay for your price of admission today, it's my encouraging you to download this app. So get out your phones and do it right now. You don't have to listen to me for the next 2 minutes while you're doing that. But the SEA app is a comprehensive app that offers a lot of different services. There's a search function on there, so while you're there, if you're like, I need a drinking fountain, where do I find that? Or I need a changing station for my baby, you can look it up there. And probably the most frequently used is when you're arriving at the airport, you open it up and it'll tell you which of the TSA lines it'll tell you under 5 minutes, 5 to 15, 15 to 30. So that when you're standing in line and checking in your bags, I'm just going to go straight over to checkpoint 1 because that's the shortest right now. So download that app. We've also got a bunch of new airport dining and retail options, including Kirkland's own Lady Yum in Concourse A. So go and eat local. And what else do we have? We have Filson and Soda Pop. We have Wendy's, which is, as a parent, sometimes you just want to go and get a kid's meal and make it easy. So make sure you get there a little bit early and take advantage of all of those new facilities. Some of the more impressive big scale projects include the new North Satellite that has been remodeled. If you were down at SeaTac anytime during the pandemic, you probably saw some of this, but basically we closed the north end, remodeled that side, closed the south end, remodeled that side. It's now entirely open. We've got a few more dining and retail options to open. But it went from being the place that when you got your ticket and it said your flight's out of North Satellite, everyone's like, oh gosh, now I have to take the train over the crappy North Satellite. Now it's the place that when you go, you're like, I hope I get to go out of the North Satellite because it's beautiful and big clerestory windows and amazing dining and retail and everything's up to date. It's a really amazing experience. I also said that the international arrivals facility is open. We're going to have 44 international direct destinations. I sometimes think we take that for granted, but living in a place where you can hop on a plane and go to 44 different international destinations is quite extraordinary, and it means that the world is open to us. Most recently, we just got Tahiti, which is our first international destination south of the equator. We priced the tickets, my wife and I did, and they're actually not too bad. So maybe it was the dates we chose, but surprise your loved one with a trip to Tahiti, nonstop. We also picked up Istanbul and Helsinki recently, so lots of different amazing one-stop or non-stop destinations from the airport. When you drive to the airport to pick up a loved one, we've reconfigured some stuff too, including the cell phone parking lot. It's a much, much nicer experience now. It's easier to get there. So we actually built a new on-ramp to get to that place. And in the next couple of years, we're going to be working on widening the arrivals drive so that that congestion that backs up in when you're going to pick somebody up will be eased a little bit. We've got, as I think I mentioned, we've got a major project in the garage underway right now. So when you go in, there are signs that indicate where spots are available. It's really intuitive. You'll see a sign that says how many stalls are available down a thing, and then when you turn down, you'll see it's red lights mean that the stalls are taken, green lights, one's available. So as you hustle down there, you'll be able to just pull right in. We've learned that it doesn't always notice smart cars, and so we're trying to figure out how we can adjust the software to pick up on smart cars. But we are also adding a bunch of electric car charging spots as well, because currently everything we have seems to fill up really quickly. We've got a bunch of new projects coming too. Some of my favorite work as a port commissioner is spending big amounts of money on cool new projects. And so I'll kind of walk through quickly the C concourse. You know, when you go into the main terminal and you take a right, and D is this way and C is this way, and there's right at that corner there, that's a little bit of dead space for us because there's some, we're trying to figure out how to create more space for dining and retail options. And so our amazing staff has figured out that there is an opportunity to build essentially a 3-story mall right there that will have options for, there'll be some additional lounge space, there will be some amenities that we don't currently have, and it's just going to be a big, light, airy space with that kind of, you can see the sort of wood paneling. That's Douglas fir, it's going to be. And then we've got I'll do the S concourse, which is, the opposite side from the north satellite. That one is really due. And so we've just approved $1 billion upgrade to that facility. That, again, will be absolutely state-of-the-art when it's done. Checkpoint 1 is going to be, instead of up on the same level as all the other checkpoints, it's going to be down below. So this is going to be like the secret locals checkpoint. So when you go to the airport after this is built, you're going to tell your loved one, take me all the way to the south end, drop me off on the arrival side at baggage claim level, and then you'll be able to scoot right in through the double doors there, past some beautiful art, and into that space. And we anticipate that that will be where crew drops off, frequent travelers, that kind of stuff. So it'll be a really nice kind of skip the lines kind of thing. And then the gateway, which one is that one? Oh, that's what they're calling it now? Okay. This used to have a really cumbersome name. It was like the North Main Terminal Mezzanine Rehabilitation Program, but I like SEA Gateway a lot better. So at the very north end of the main terminal, when you go in for ticketing right now, you walk in and that whole place is built for pre-9/11 airport functions, pre-cell phones, pre-security requirements. And so we're finally working with Alaska to update that whole section of the ticketing area. So what they're going to do is they're going to take that whole mezzanine out, open up the space so it's big and airy and light, and add a bunch of new technology to make sure that you move through that extremely quickly. And that's a really innovative partnership between Alaska, which is our principal airline, and the Port of Seattle to get this thing done as quickly as possible now that we're out of COVID times. Okay, that's a lot of information. I would love to answer questions about anything related to the port, or if you're totally sick and tired of me, just keep your hands down and we can be done. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I heard or read that the Seattle Airport is the only airport with a full-time art curator. Is that correct?
I don't know if we're the only one, but Tommy Gregory is our full-time art curator, and he also has an assistant. And actually 3 years ago, the commission voted to double the art allocation, the funding for the art program, which is predominantly comes from capital construction. So it's a 1% capital construction allotment. And we do that across the port. So it's not just the airport, but we do that at our maritime facilities as well. And it is a museum there. I mean, it is, and Tommy has been extraordinary. So he's moved some less beloved pieces into places that are less trafficked. And brought in some new art. I mean, the North Satellite is an excellent example of it. When you come in and you see there's this wooden, it's essentially like the root ball and the trunk of a tree, and it is absolutely stunning. And then the new IAF, the IAF has a couple of pieces in there. One of which was a wonderful project in which we have an internship program in collaboration with a couple of the local Native American tribes for their high school students. And the high school students said, we think that would be an excellent place to showcase Native American art. And so when you go into the International Rivals facility, people walk right by this art exhibit that was inspired by students and that really speaks to our history as a region. So yeah, it's a great program. Yeah, Christian.
Internet access for the maritime facilities like we have at the airport, Maritime Industrial Center, Terminal 91, Fisherman's Terminal. Is there any? I've been asking for that for 2 decades.
First I've heard of it. Let's see if we can get it up tomorrow.
Thank you.
No, that's great to hear, Christian. I appreciate that.
It
Yeah,
would be very helpful for industry to have that.
absolutely. No, that's great. That's both of my hats, both commissioner and my tech hat.
So I was just talking about this right before the presentation. Human trafficking. I know the Port of Seattle has a big commitment to anti-human trafficking. Can you speak a little bit about the work that the port is doing in that space?
You bet, you bet. So when I joined the commission, I partnered with Courtney Gregoire, who was a commissioner at the time. She left the commission, and then Sam joined the commission in her seat. And the two of them have been absolutely extraordinary leaders on this issue, working with an organization called BEST. And they have helped to provide us with required training materials for not only port employees, but now we're expanding it to the 350 businesses who employ people at the airport facility to be able to do that kind of training. And the reason that training is so important and why it's a critical function in preventing human trafficking is that many people who are trafficked through SeaTac don't know they're being trafficked until after they've left our facility. There's perceptions around sort of human trafficking, but a lot of it is related to agricultural work and other forms of labor, forced labor, that maybe not we wouldn't understand, but it's a relative or an acquaintance who invites somebody from overseas to come visit, and then their passport is seized and they're forced to work as a domestic servant or an agricultural laborer. And so we've done a ton of work to help our employees identify, and that's it's for Delta and Alaska. They also do trainings for their flight staff as well, so that there's some signals there. And then we've provided signage, and I think it's something like 18 languages, so that when you go into a restroom at SeaTac and you sit down and you look up, you'll see there's a sign on the back of the stall door in various languages, including information on how to get help. And whether it's a phone call or contacting somebody with a uniform at the airport, and they'll know what to do. So very, very important program. And and we want to be a leader in that as well. So any other questions? I wish I had giveaways. Like here's a ticket to Tahiti.
Yes, cruise. On the question of public transport, living on the east side of hopefully Kirkland and east side Groves, is there any plans on connecting Port of Seattle with the public transport agencies to create a easier way to get to the airport from the east side?
Great question. So we think a lot about how do we move people to the airport. And we have what we call the Ground Transportation Access Plan, which is if there are 4 choke points for our airport, it's air traffic, it's the ramp area, the planes moving around, the facility itself, and then the 4th is ground transportation. How do we get people to and from? And as an airport, we're about 70% origin and destination, meaning 70% of the people flying to and from SeaTac this is either origin or destination. Whereas Denver is 30%, and they're 70% people just stopping over. So ground transportation for us is a much more acute problem than other big airports. So we think a lot about that, and we're constantly talking to Sound Transit about how do we encourage people to use Sound Transit as a means, because it's not overutilized at this point. We know some of the pain points there, including no place to put your luggage. It's a bit of a walk once you get to the terminal. So we're addressing some of that, including in one of our long-range plans, we will build a concourse from the light rail station at SeaTac to our main terminal, so that once you get to the light rail station, you sort of feel like you're already in the airport instead of having to walk through the parking garage. But in addition to that, in Kirkland in particular, I think you will best be served by the BRT line that's going to be going down 405, and that will provide a sort of express version, since Sound Transit, light rail isn't a particularly useful means of mass transit for folks living in this area. But that BRT, actually, I remember the last time I got briefed on it, it's a much, much quicker way because it's much more direct, fewer stops than if you were to get on a train anyways, if you had a loved one drop you at one of the light rail stations. So I think that is likely going to be a great way to do it. We've looked at all sorts of outside the box. We've talked about, could we have a remote baggage drop off where you drop your luggage in, you know, like a big bus stop in downtown Kirkland, and then that luggage immediately gets checked, and then you just jump on a bus and you end up post security at the airport. We've tried to find ways to make that economically viable, and it just doesn't seem like that's the right fit. So then the other part is, how do we figure out ways to make sure that folks aren't having to deadhead, meaning go and drop a loved one off and then leave and then come back and get them when they finish their trip, but find other ways to consolidate trips as much as we can and make it a pleasant trip to the airport. The other thing to keep in mind is if we can get employees to use something other than private vehicles to get to and from the airport, that's much more impactful on a person-by-person basis, because they go to the airport 200 days out of the year. So that's 400 trips, right? Whereas for most of us, we're not going to go to the airport that often. Maybe a heavy user is 10 to 20 times a year. Most folks, it might be 1 or 2 times a year. So we really want to get impact. If we can get employees to choose another form of transit, then we can sort of leave those private vehicle trips to the passengers to facilitate it for them. So that's one of the things that we're working on too, for sure. Thank you all so much. I'm going to leave business cards. I'll leave cards here too, and please do reach out directly to me if you have other questions that didn't come up in this session.